Applause broke out in the courtroom as a judge sentenced Claudia Banton to 23 years to life behind bars.
I feel she deserved more, but today is about changing. Today is about forgiving.
The sentencing marks the end of a 4-year nightmare for the family of Delia Johnson, shot execution style on a Crown Heights sidewalk in 2021.
So a group of people stand on a sidewalk, talking and laughing. They just came from a funeral for a friend. Among them is 42-year-old Delia Johnson, a mother and business owner. She's relaxed, chatting with the crowd. It's supposed to be a peaceful night of remembrance. Then, a white SUV pulls up and double parks on the street. A woman steps out. She's calm. Too calm. She hides something behind her back as she walks toward the group. Delia doesn't see her coming. She doesn't even turn around. The woman gets closer, closer. Then a gunshot to the back of Delia's head, point-blank range. Delia drops to the ground. But the shooter isn't done. She fires again, and again, and again. 5 more shots into Delia's body. People scream and run. The shooter? She calmly walks back to the SUV like nothing happened and drives away. Here's the twist that makes this case so disturbing. The killer wasn't a stranger. Her name was Claudia Banton, Delia's childhood friend. Someone Delia's own mother treated like a daughter. So what could make a lifelong friend become a cold-blooded killer? Welcome to Crazy Dark Files. Right now, there are people walking around who have no idea that someone they trust, someone they call a friend, could be planning to hurt them. If you want to help spread awareness about betrayal, street violence, and the warning signs that could save innocent lives, then please like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your action now could help someone recognize danger before it's too late. Before we begin, let me know, what state or country are you watching from? I love hearing from viewers all over the world. Now, let me take you back to where this all began and show you exactly what led to this deadly betrayal. Delia was 42 years old and born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Crown Heights wasn't just where she lived, it was her home. She knew the streets, the people, the culture. She was a familiar face in the neighborhood, someone people recognized and respected. But more than anything, Delia was a mother. She had children who loved her deeply. Her oldest daughter was 21 years old and serving in the United States Air Force. Imagine being deployed overseas, protecting your country, and then getting the news that your mother was murdered. That's the reality Delia's daughter had to face. Delia came from a close family. Her mother, Delia Berry, was a strong woman who raised her children with love. Delia also had siblings, her brother Mathis Lemons and her sister Cordelia McRae. They weren't just family. They were tight. They looked out for each other. They spent time together. And when Delia died, they were completely destroyed. Delia wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But the people who knew her said she had a big heart. She was the type of person who would help you if you needed it. She ran her own business and worked hard to take care of her family. She wasn't rich or famous, but she was loved. And in a neighborhood like Crown Heights, that meant everything. Delia had a wide circle of friends. She was well known in the community. People trusted her. She was the kind of person you could call when you needed advice or just someone to talk to. She had been building these relationships for years, some of them going all the way back to childhood. And that's where Claudia Banton comes in. Delia and Claudia grew up together. They weren't just friends. They were like family. Their families knew each other well. They celebrated birthdays together. They went through hard times together. They were there for each other. In fact, Delia's mother, Delia Berry, considered Claudia like her own daughter. She treated Claudia with the same love and care she gave her own children. Claudia was welcome in their home anytime. She was part of the family. So when Claudia Banton walked up behind Delia Johnson on that sidewalk and shot her in the head, it wasn't just murder. It was betrayal at the deepest level. It was a violation of trust that had been built over decades. Delia had no reason to fear Claudia. Even if they had problems, even if there was tension, Delia never imagined that her childhood friend someone her own mother loved, would take her life. On August 4th, 2021, Delia Johnson woke up like any other day. She went to a funeral for a friend. She planned to go home afterward. She had no idea that by the end of the night, she would be dead, killed by someone she had known her entire life. But to understand why Claudia did what she did, we need to talk about who Claudia Banton really was. Claudia Banton was 4 years older than Delia. Like Delia, she was born and raised in Brooklyn. They grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same places, knew the same people. For years, they were inseparable. But while Delia and Claudia shared a childhood, their lives took very different paths. Claudia had a darker side. She was affiliated with the Bloods, one of the most notorious gangs in New York. This wasn't just a phase or something she did as a teenager. Gang life was part of who Claudia was. And with that lifestyle came violence, crime, and a completely different set of rules. Claudia had a serious criminal record. She served 7 years in prison for forgery. 7 years. That's a long time to be locked up, and it shows that Claudia wasn't afraid to break the law. She knew the system. She knew what it was like to be behind bars. Claudia also went by several different names. Some people knew her as Claudia Williams, others called her Kesha Brown. On the streets, she had a nickname, Big Booty Bandit. These aliases weren't just for fun. They were part of her street identity, a way to move through different circles and avoid detection when needed. But here's the thing. Despite her criminal past and gang ties, Claudia still maintained her friendship with Delia. Even though their lives were different, they stayed connected. Delia's family still welcomed Claudia. They still treated her like one of their own. Claudia had a boyfriend, or baby father, depending on how you want to describe him. They had a daughter together. And like many mothers, Claudia loved her daughter more than anything in the world. That little girl was everything to her. But Claudia lived by a code. It's called the Code of the Streets. And one of the biggest rules in that code is this: you never go to the police. No matter what happens, you don't snitch. You don't call the cops. You handle your problems yourself. In Claudia's world, the law wasn't there to protect you. The law was the enemy. If someone wronged you, you didn't file a report or press charges. You took care of it on your own. That's street justice. So here you have two childhood friends. Delia, a business owner and mother trying to live her life, and Claudia, a woman with gang ties and a criminal past, who lived by a completely different set of rules. They came from the same place, but they walked different paths, and yet they stayed connected. Their families stayed close. But that connection was about to be shattered in the most violent way possible, because something happened that would push Claudia past the point of no return. So what caused a lifelong friendship to end in murder? It all started with Claudia's boyfriend. For reasons that aren't completely clear, Delia Johnson had serious problems with Claudia Banton's boyfriend, the father of Claudia's daughter, and according to sources close to the case, Delia Johnson did something that crossed a major line in the world of street justice. She allegedly put a hit out on Claudia's boyfriend. Let that sink in for a moment. Delia's childhood friend, someone Claudia's family loved, allegedly ordered someone to kill Claudia's man, the father of Claudia's child. In the streets, that's one of the worst things you can do. It's not just an attack on one person, it's an attack on a family. It's a declaration of war. So the hit was set in motion, someone was sent to carry it out, and one day they found Claudia's boyfriend and opened fire. But here's where everything went horribly wrong. When the shooting happened, Claudia's daughter was with her father. The little girl, an innocent child who had nothing to do with any of this, was caught in the crossfire. She was shot. Badly. Imagine getting that phone call. Your daughter has been shot. She's in critical condition. You need to get to the hospital now. Claudia rushed to the hospital and found her daughter fighting for her life. The doctors were doing everything they could, but the injuries were severe. The bullet had caused massive damage. For about a week, Claudia sat by her daughter's bedside. She watched the machines breathe for her child. She held her hand. She prayed. She hoped for a miracle. But the miracle never came. The doctors finally told Claudia the truth. There was no hope. Her daughter's brain activity was gone. She was being kept alive by machines, but she was already gone. Claudia had to make a decision that no parent should ever have to make. She had to decide whether to keep her daughter on life support or let her go. And on August 4th, 2021, Claudia Banton pulled the plug on her daughter. She watched her little girl take her last breath. She said goodbye to the child she brought into this world. And in that moment, something inside Claudia broke. This wasn't just grief. This was rage. This was a mother's pain turned into something dark and unstoppable. In Claudia's mind, Delia Johnson was responsible. Delia ordered the hit. Delia set everything in motion. And because of Delia, Claudia's daughter was dead. The code of the streets doesn't allow for forgiveness in situations like this. It doesn't allow for second chances. If someone takes your family, you take theirs. That's the rule, and Claudia Banton was about to follow that rule to the letter. On the same day she pulled the plug on her daughter, the same day, Claudia made a decision. She wasn't going to the police. She wasn't going to wait for justice. She was going to handle this herself. And that's exactly what she did. But how did she get to Delia? How did she pull off an execution in broad view of witnesses? And what happened next? Let's talk about August 4th, 2021, the day everything exploded. August 4th, 2021 started as the worst day of Claudia Banton's life. That morning, she stood in a hospital room and made the decision no mother should ever have to make. She told the doctors to turn off the machines keeping her daughter alive. She watched as her little girl, the child she had carried, raised, and loved, took her final breath. That same day, the same day Claudia lost her daughter, there was a funeral happening in Brooklyn. A mutual friend of both Claudia and Delia had passed away, and people from their circle were gathering to pay their respect. Both Claudia and Delia attended the funeral. Think about that for a second. These two women, one who had just lost her daughter and one who was allegedly responsible, were in the same place at the same time. They were surrounded by people who knew both of them, people who knew what had happened. But there was no confrontation, no argument, no scene. According to witnesses, Claudia and Delia didn't even interact. They kept their distance. The funeral went on without any drama. After the service ended, Delia planned to go home. She had paid her respects. She had seen her friends. Now she just wanted to leave. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. The mutual friends in their circle, the people who knew both women, had to pick a side. And they picked Claudia. They knew what Delia had allegedly done. They knew about the hit. They knew Claudia's daughter was dead because of it, and in their minds, Delia had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. So they came up with a plan. They were going to set Delia up. Later that evening, Delia got a phone call. Her friends told her to come to Franklin Avenue in Crown Heights. They said people were gathering for a candlelight vigil to honor the friend they had just buried. It sounded innocent. It sounded normal. Delia's brother, Mathis Lemons, later said that Delia didn't seem worried or suspicious when she got the call. She had no reason to be. These were her friends. These were people she trusted. So Delia went. Around 9:40 p.m., she arrived at the corner of Franklin Avenue and Prospect Place. A group of people were already there, standing on the sidewalk talking and remembering their friend. Delia joined them. She started chatting. She was relaxed. She felt safe. But while Delia was standing there, completely unaware, someone in the group sent a message. "Delia's at the spot." That message went straight to Claudia Banton, and Claudia didn't hesitate. She got into a white SUV and headed toward Franklin Avenue. Imagine what was going through Claudia's mind in that moment. Just hours earlier, she had buried her daughter, not in the ground, but in her heart. The grief was still fresh. The pain was still raw. And now, the person she blamed for all of it was standing on a street corner, laughing and talking like nothing had happened. Claudia wasn't thinking clearly. How could she? She had just experienced every parent's worst nightmare. Her reality was warped. Her emotions were out of control, and the code of the streets, the code she had lived by her entire life, told her exactly what to do. Don't go to the police. Don't wait for justice. Handle it yourself. So that's exactly what Claudia did. As she drove toward Franklin Avenue, she wasn't thinking about consequences. She wasn't thinking about prison or her own children or what this would do to her life. She was thinking about one thing and one thing only: revenge. And Delia Johnson had no idea what was coming. At 9:40 p.m., the white SUV pulled up to Franklin Avenue and double-parked on the street. The door opened. Claudia Banton stepped out. She wasn't running. She wasn't frantic. She was calm, focused, determined. She had a gun, and she hid it behind her back as she walked toward the group of people on the sidewalk. Delia Johnson was still chatting with friends. She was facing away from the street, completely unaware that Claudia was approaching. She didn't hear the footsteps. She didn't sense the danger. She had no idea that in a few seconds her life would be over. Claudia walked closer, closer. She raised the gun, and then a single shot to the back of Delia's head, point-blank range. Delia dropped to the ground instantly. Her body went limp. Blood pooled on the sidewalk. But Claudia wasn't finished. She stood over Delia's body and fired again, and again, and again. 5 more shots. She emptied the gun into Delia, making sure there was no chance of survival. The people around them screamed. They scattered in every direction, running for their lives. Chaos erupted. Some people dove behind cars. Others sprinted down the street. The sound of gunfire echoed through the neighborhood. And Claudia? She didn't run. She didn't panic. She calmly turned around, walked back to the white SUV, got in, and drove away. Just like that, no hesitation, no remorse. She had done what she came to do. Within minutes, emergency responders arrived at the scene. They found Delia Johnson lying on the sidewalk, unconscious and unresponsive. She had been shot multiple times, once in the head and several times in the body. There was blood everywhere. Paramedics rushed her to Interfaith Hospital, but it was too late. Delia Johnson was pronounced dead. A woman had just been executed in front of a crowd of mourners during a candlelight vigil on a public street. And the killer had walked away like it was nothing. The NYPD immediately launched an investigation. They collected evidence, they interviewed witnesses, and they reviewed surveillance footage from nearby cameras. The footage showed everything. It showed the white SUV pulling up. It showed Claudia stepping out with the gun. It showed her walking up to Delia, shooting her, and calmly leaving the scene. It was all on camera, clear as day. But here's the part that's almost unbelievable. Just minutes after the shooting, Claudia Banton was pulled over by police. Yes, you heard that right. Minutes after committing murder, she was stopped by a cop. But the officer who pulled her over had been given a description of the suspect, and that description said they were looking for a male, a man, not a woman. So the officer looked at Claudia, saw that she didn't match the description, and let her go. Claudia Banton drove away, and she disappeared. For nearly 4 months, she was a ghost. No one knew where she was. The NYPD had her face on wanted posters. The media was covering the case. Delia's family was begging for justice. But Claudia was gone. Can you imagine a childhood friend, someone your family considered like a daughter, executing you in cold blood in front of witnesses? Right now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Claudia's grief justified her actions, or was this pure, cold-blooded murder? There's no easy answer here, and I want to know what you think. If you're finding this case as shocking as I am, please hit that like button and share this video. Stories like this need to be told, and your support helps us keep bringing you these deep dives. Now, let's talk about what happened next. For nearly 4 months, Claudia Banton was a ghost. But the police weren't giving up. The NYPD wasn't going to let this case go cold. They launched an intensive investigation immediately. Detectives worked around the clock, interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence, and piecing together what happened that night. And they had something powerful on their side: surveillance footage. The cameras on Franklin Avenue captured everything. The white SUV pulling up, Claudia stepping out with the gun, the execution, her walking back to the vehicle. It was all there, recorded in clear detail. The police released images and video clips to the public. They put Claudia Banton's face on the news. They asked anyone with information to come forward. The message was clear. We know who did this, and we need to find her. The community was shaken. People in Crown Heights couldn't believe what they had witnessed. A woman had been murdered in broad view during a vigil for a friend. It felt like nowhere was safe anymore. Vigils were held for Delia Johnson. Friends and family gathered with candles, flowers, and photos. They cried, they prayed, they demanded justice. Delia's mother, Delia Berry, stood in front of the cameras and begged for someone to help bring her daughter's killer to justice. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, there was still no arrest. Claudia Banton had vanished. Delia's family was in agony. Every day that passed without an arrest felt like another injustice. They wondered if Claudia would ever be caught. They wondered if she had gotten away with murder. Behind the scenes, investigators were tracking Claudia's movements. They discovered that she had fled New York and gone south, all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. On November 8, 2021, almost 4 months after the murder, U.S. Marshals finally tracked Claudia Banton down in Jacksonville. They moved in and arrested her. Claudia Banton was in custody. The news spread quickly. Delia's family finally got the call they had been waiting for. The woman who killed their daughter, their sister, their mother, she had been caught. Claudia was extradited back to New York to face charges. She was formally charged with second-degree murder and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon. When Delia's family heard the news, they felt a wave of relief. It wasn't going to bring Delia back. Nothing could do that. But at least now there was a chance for justice. At least now Claudia would have to answer for what she did. Delia's brother, Mathis Lemons, spoke to reporters. "We've been waiting for this moment," he said. "Now she has to face what she did." But the legal battle was just beginning, and it would take nearly 4 more years before this case would finally be resolved. After Claudia Banton's arrest in November 2021, Delia Johnson's family thought the hard part was over. They thought justice would come quickly, but it didn't. The case dragged on for nearly 4 years. Court dates were delayed. Legal motions were filed, and Delia's family had to relive the pain over and over again, waiting for their day in court. Finally, in 2025, the trial began. Claudia's defense attorney was a man named Jonathan Strauss, and he wasn't going down without a fight. For weeks, Strauss poked holes in the prosecution's case. He questioned witnesses. He challenged the evidence. He argued that the surveillance footage wasn't as clear as the prosecution claimed. Despite everything, despite the video, despite the witnesses, despite the fact that Claudia was caught on camera, Strauss maintained his client's innocence. And honestly, the outcome wasn't as certain as you might think. Defense attorneys are skilled at creating doubt. They know how to make juries question what they see. And Strauss was doing exactly that. But then, something happened that changed everything. A surprise witness came forward. This wasn't just any witness. This was someone who had been there that night. Someone who was standing on the sidewalk when Delia was shot. And here's the kicker. This person was a longtime friend of both Delia and Claudia. The defense had no idea this witness existed. They hadn't prepared for it. They hadn't planned a counter-strategy. The witness appeared mid-trial, and it blindsided them. The witness took the stand and testified under oath. They looked directly at the jury and said, "I was there, I saw everything, and the person who shot Delia Johnson was Claudia Banton." The courtroom went silent. Jonathan Strauss later admitted to reporters, "That's the witness we had no idea about until we were in the middle of the trial." It was a major blow to the defense, maybe the biggest blow. The prosecution built their case around one central argument. This was a cold-blooded execution. Claudia Banton didn't act in self-defense. She didn't act in the heat of the moment. She planned it. She showed up with a gun. She walked up to Delia in front of a crowd of mourners and shot her multiple times. It was brazen. It was calculated. It was murder. After weeks of testimony, the case finally went to the jury. For 3 hours, the jury deliberated. 3 hours might not sound like a long time, but for Delia's family it felt like an eternity. 4 years of waiting had come down to this moment. Inside the courtroom you could feel the tension. Delia's mother sat with her hands clasped together. Her brother stared straight ahead. Her sister wiped tears from her eyes. And then the jury returned. The judge asked for the verdict. Guilty. Guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of criminal possession of a weapon, guilty on all charges. Applause broke out in the courtroom. People cheered. Delia's family hugged each other and cried. After 4 long years, they finally had justice. Claudia Banton showed no emotion. She sat quietly as the verdict was read. But for Delia's family, this was the moment they had been fighting for. It didn't bring Delia back. It didn't erase the pain, but it meant that Claudia would be held accountable for what she did. Now, all that was left was the sentencing, and that's when the family would finally get to speak directly to the woman who destroyed their lives. May 19, 2025, Sentencing Day. The courtroom was packed. Delia Johnson's family sat in the front row, waiting for their chance to finally speak. Claudia Banton sat at the defense table, her face blank, her hands folded in front of her. This was the moment the family had been waiting for, the moment they could look Claudia in the eye and tell her exactly what she had taken from them. The judge called for victim impact statements. One by one, Delia's family members stood up and spoke. First was Delia Berry, Delia's mother. She walked slowly to the front of the courtroom. And then she did something that shocked everyone. She locked eyes with Claudia Banton and said, "I did the best I could for Claudia." Let that sink in. This was a woman who had treated Claudia like her own daughter. She had welcomed her into her home. She had loved her. And Claudia repaid that love by murdering her actual daughter. The weight of those words hung in the air. It wasn't just about the murder. It was about the betrayal, the broken trust, the shattered bond. Next was Mathis Lemons, Delia's brother. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Her kids can still call her, still visit her," he said, pointing at Claudia. "I'll never see my sister again. I'll never laugh with her again." He was right. Claudia's children could still write her letters. They could visit her in prison. They could hear her voice. But Delia's family? They would never hear her voice again, never hug her again, never celebrate another birthday or holiday with her. Then Cordelia McRae, Delia's sister, stood up. She looked at Claudia and said, "I feel like she deserved more. But today is about change, and today is about forgiving." Even in her pain, she was trying to find peace, try to let go of the anger. But you could hear the hurt in her voice. And then came the most heartbreaking moment of all. Delia's 21-year-old daughter appeared on a video screen. She was wearing her U.S. Air Force uniform. She was serving her country thousands of miles away, and she had to watch her mother's killer get sentenced over a video call. She struggled to speak. Her voice shook, tears streamed down her face, and then she said something that stunned the entire courtroom. She thanked Claudia for making sure her mother didn't suffer. Think about that. This young woman, who lost her mother in the most violent way possible, was trying to find some small piece of mercy in an unmerciful act. She was trying to believe that at least her mother's death was quick, that she didn't feel pain. It was a moment of grace in the middle of unimaginable grief. Claudia Banton didn't speak. Her attorney, Jonathan Strauss, explained that she was staying silent for legal reasons. They were planning to appeal the conviction, and anything she said could be used against her. But even though Claudia didn't speak, her body did. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she listened to the family's statements. Whether those tears were from guilt, regret, or her own grief, we'll never know. Judge Margaret Martin, who had presided over the trial, became emotional herself. She acknowledged the profound grief that Delia's family would carry for the rest of their lives. She spoke about the senselessness of the crime and the devastation it caused. And then she delivered the sentence. 23 years to life. Applause broke out in the courtroom. Delia's family hugged each other. Some cried. Some smiled for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was justice. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez released a statement afterward. He called the murder a cold-blooded execution and said it was especially shocking that the defendant was so brazen as to carry out this murder among a crowd of mourners. Claudia Banton would spend at least the next 23 years behind bars, and depending on the parole board, she might never get out. But the question still remained, why did she do it? Here's the part of the story that wasn't discussed in court. The part that explains everything. Claudia Banton pulled the plug on her daughter on August 4th, 2021, and on that same day, just hours later, she executed Delia Johnson. This wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. In Claudia's mind, Delia Johnson was responsible for her daughter's death. Remember the hit that Delia allegedly ordered on Claudia's boyfriend, the one that went wrong and resulted in Claudia's daughter getting shot? That's what this was all about. Claudia believed, whether it was true or not, that Delia had set everything in motion, and because of that, her daughter was dead. So why wasn't this motive presented at trial? Why didn't the prosecution or the defense talk about it? There are two reasons. First, the code of the streets. In that world, you don't go to the police. You don't cooperate with investigations. You don't snitch. Claudia wasn't going to admit that her daughter was killed because of street beef, and the people who knew the truth weren't going to testify about it either. Second, legal strategy. If the defense had brought up the motive, it could have actually helped Claudia's case. The jury might have felt sympathy for her. They might have seen her as a grieving mother who snapped. It could have supported a temporary insanity defense or led to a lesser charge. But it also would have opened the door to a lot of other questions that could complicate things legally, so neither side wanted to go there. But now that the trial is over, we can talk about it. And we have to ask ourselves, can we understand Claudia's actions without condoning them? A mother's grief is unimaginable. Losing a child is the worst pain a person can experience. And when that loss is sudden, violent, and feels preventable, the desire for revenge can be overwhelming. Love for a child can drive people to do unthinkable things. It can warp your sense of right and wrong. It can make you believe that violence is the only answer. It's easy to sit here and say, I would never do that. It's easy to judge Claudia and call her a monster. But until you've experienced that level of loss, you don't really know how you'd react. That being said, understanding doesn't equal justification. Two wrongs don't make a right. Claudia's daughter didn't deserve to die, but neither did Delia Johnson. Taking another life didn't bring Claudia's daughter back. It didn't ease her pain. It just created more pain, more death, more broken families. This is the cycle of violence. One shooting led to another. One act of revenge led to another tragedy, and now 2 families are destroyed. Claudia's children are growing up without their mother. Delia's children are growing up without theirs. Both families are left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. And for what? Because people believed in street justice instead of the legal system. Because they thought revenge was the answer. It wasn't. So where do things stand now? Claudia Banton is in prison serving 23 years to life, but her legal team isn't giving up. Her attorney Jonathan Strauss has announced plans to appeal the conviction. He's citing legal issues, including the surprise witness who testified mid-trial. The appeal process could take years, so this case might not be fully over yet. Meanwhile, Delia Johnson's family is trying to heal. Her sister, Cordelia McRae, said it best. It ain't easy, but I know one day it will get better. They're taking it one day at a time. They're leaning on each other. They're keeping Delia's memory alive, but the pain will never fully go away. The Crown Heights community is still dealing with the impact of this tragedy. The murder shattered their sense of safety. It showed that violence can happen anywhere, even during a vigil for a friend. And it raised bigger questions about the cost of street justice. What if Claudia had gone to the police when her daughter was shot? What if she had trusted the legal system to handle it? What if the code of the streets didn't exist? Would both women still be alive today? We'll never know. But it's worth thinking about. This case is a tragedy on every level. Two childhood friends, two families who were once close. Now one woman is dead and one is in prison for life. Children are growing up without their mothers. Siblings are grieving their sisters. Parents have lost their daughters, and a community has been traumatized by a murder that never should have happened. The cycle of violence doesn't just hurt the people directly involved. It ripples outward, affecting everyone around them, friends, family, neighbors, entire communities. And it all could have been avoided. So I want to know, what do you think? Was Claudia Banton justified in seeking revenge for her daughter's death? Or was this simply cold-blooded murder? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And here's another question. Do you think the code of the streets does more harm than good? Let's have a real conversation about this. If this case affected you the way it affected me, please share this video. Delia Johnson's story deserves to be told, and her family deserves to have her memory honored. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into cases like this one.